Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all well. It has been a while, obviously, for reasons that I'm sure you are aware of. I have been quite careful with my live stream since we have had a Marxist, fanatical, psychotic dictator in charge. But the question I'm asking tonight is, has Reform UK self-destructed? Why am I asking this question? Well, there have been 2 or 3 issues over the last week or two, and the one that has struck a chord, or not, as the case may be, with many supporters just today, was when Richard Tice was on the record on GB News stating his disassociation with Tommy Robinson's supporters and how he offended them by putting them down, referring to them as them lot. And to be honest, I have had quite a few emails from local supporters who are now going to be ex-supporters who were very upset, and understandably so. Let's keep in mind what the narrative has been where Tommy Robinson is concerned, and obviously you can draw your own conclusions with regards to that. But Tommy Robinson is not running for office. He is presenting news, evidence, and if you like, hard facts that prove the police have covered up so many incidents for political reasons. He does have a lot of support, and I would go so far as to say as he probably has more support than any one individual within the Reform Party, and therefore offending his supporters who mostly voted Reform UK in the last election was not a very wise thing to do. And as I said, I have had several emails from Reform UK voters and supporters who are basically cancelling their membership and will not be voting Reform again because they are so offended. And this is not a very wise thing to do at this point in time. This follows on from Nigel Farage's video last week, where he informed everyone that he was going to be writing to well over 1,000 Conservative councillors asking them to step across to Reform. Personally, I see this as a slap in the face to every Reform candidate who stood, who fought the fight, funded themselves, had to fight against all of the media narrative that was very, very hostile to Reform candidates as well as their supporters. For him to effectively be inviting the Conservatives, who are the reason that the country has been brought to its knees, to step across. What about the Reform candidates? What about the Reform supporters who would like to stand as candidates for Reform? What is really going on? And is this the straw that will have broken the camel's back? And is this a step too far? Because could the damage be from all of these Tommy Robinson supporters who are now deeply offended, abandoning Reform UK? Could this literally be the end of the rise of Reform UK? And in fact, could it be a catastrophic, the beginning of a catastrophic downfall? I don't know. All I can say at this moment in time is that lots of people are really offended, and I completely understand why they are. Paula, good evening. Not very intelligent of him. No, not at all. Because ultimately, everybody stood for their own reasons. Most candidates who stood for Reform were everyday people. They weren't politicians. They were people who just had enough and wanted to stand up for free speech, for our country, for our sovereignty, for our borders, for our old, for our young, for our education, for our healthcare. I'm sure you are aware of all of these things. I don't need to keep repeating them. And personally, I didn't go along with anything simply because it was the Reform narrative. I happen to agree with their policies, and I would have loved the opportunity of putting them into practice. And I do believe that they are very sensible policies. But at the same time, I stood because I wanted to speak out and object to whatever it is that I do not like, to raise issues. Effectively, I wanted to be a political troublemaker in a good sense, to highlight whatever is wrong, to encourage people to question things, to speak up, and to feel that there are, or to know that there are many other people who feel the same despite the media narrative. Let's not forget that 80% of those eligible to vote did not vote for this toxic, disgraceful administration. 80%. I can't think of a time when an administration with such a small share of the vote had such a large control of Parliament. But as I've said before, this was not a Labour victory. This was a Conservative catastrophe, which was precipitated by reform. And what we've seen since the election is silence, in reality, from reform. The silence from reform actually has been thunderous. And apart from a few questions that have been repeated several times, for the main part, the only time that they've spoken up passionately is either, on the one hand, to make it clear that they do not want any deals with the Conservatives. I don't know why they feel the need to continually repeat that narrative, but that raises questions in itself. Then we hear that they're inviting Conservative candidates to move to reform. Then the rest of the time, all we hear is how they condemn and disassociate themselves with Tommy Robinson. But Tommy Robinson has a 7-figure supporter base, most of which voted for Reform UK. Let's not forget that before the election, Tommy Robinson went on the record advising everyone to vote Reform. And all they've done since is join the media circus in condemning him, which was not a very wise thing to do. But after yesterday's mass meeting, I was in London, but I couldn't attend because I was at a meeting. But I think this was, there were even more people than at the last one. It was not a wise thing to do to insult them. The question now is, has this caused irreparable damage? Are they going to continue with this narrative and alienate even more Reform supporters, or are they going to see sense? Because what we are seeing now is the core Reform supporters being pushed away, being insulted, not just directly, but also indirectly, because what is the agenda here? Do they simply want to mutate Reform into the Conservative Party by the back door? Is it simply a personal campaign against the Reform Party? Because there are many candidates who are arguing or making an argument that we were used effectively as some part of some personal vendetta against the Conservative Party, simply to destroy it, and our job is now done. If you remember, immediately after the election, I made an argument. I understand why the party didn't and couldn't democratise before the election, because when it was small, it would have been at risk of effectively being taken over by several thousand Labour voters, and they could have all joined and taken over control of the party. But as the party grew after the election, my belief is the first objective should have been, we will now democratise as soon as possible, within a week, within a month, within a quarter, whatever that may be. all paid up members will be able to vote for their local candidate. Their local candidate will be democratically elected. There will be hopefully several candidates to stand in each constituency, because I don't want to be the default candidate. I'm sure others are the same. I would have happily encouraged others to stand, because it's not about the individual. It is about democracy, and it is about the person who is best suitable to do the job, and the person who the local community in the constituency would like to represent them. As it stands now, we do not have an opposition member, an official opposition member in each constituency, and this should have been done ages ago. We can see what this nutcase is doing to our country, and yet there is no official opposition candidate in each constituency representing Reform UK who can hold them to account. And this should have been the first step. So not only have the candidates who worked very, very hard, and I can say from personal experience, it was not easy, even though it was a pleasure to stand. But after the election, most of the candidates have literally just been cast aside. And to add insult to injury, Nigel Farage is going on the record telling everybody that he's pandering to Conservative councillors, inviting them to move over to Reform. If they're still Conservative councillors, if they do not have the integrity to have walked away from a party that betrayed this country for 14 years, if they need to be asked, to be pandered to join Reform UK, do we want them to represent our party? Because I wouldn't. Hello, Roy. He just lost a few 100,000 votes. Reform are part of the establishment, being saying it for months. I'm very sadly may have to agree with you here. Definitely several 100,000 votes, and I would have expected that once Richard and Nigel and Rupert had parliamentary privilege, that they would have stood up and fought the fight. What actually happened when they actually walked into Parliament? Did somebody pull up some photos from 20 years ago and tell them, if you misbehave, we'll publish these? I don't know. But all I know is, from the minute they entered Parliament, as far as I'm concerned, they were neutered. And they have been playing the game. I don't see Parliament. I don't see opposition. I don't see MPs fighting for their constituencies. In fact, they don't. How can MPs, of the main parties anyway, the Uni Party, how can they represent their constituents when they answer to the party whip, who tells them what they are to eat, when they're going to sleep, what they're going to believe, what they're going to say, what they're going to vote for? We're supposed to have a representative democracy, but we have nothing of the sort. And even though there's 5 of them, 4 really, because their fluke candidate from Basildon, I have a feeling, was told, you're here by accident, so just keep it shut, because we don't seem to hear anything from him. As for the other 4, we just hear lip service, and when they do go into further detail, to be perfectly honest, certainly Richard and Nigel, they're not doing themselves or the party any favours whatsoever. And Roy again, Farage is a coward, big mouth, when he has nothing to lose for himself, but when it comes to the silent majority, he plays chess. The majority are not pawns for his personal gain. Well, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, many of the candidates do feel that they were just that they were just pawns in some sort of personal vendetta, a political gain to destroy the Conservative Party. And that, in light of where we are now, that is is a terrible state of affairs, because we knew that fighting as hard as we did, that we would exacerbate the Conservative loss. And Reform is directly responsible for the Conservatives losing as many as an extra 100 seats, 80 seats, whatever the figure may be, which is fine, provided that we were in a position to fill that vacuum, albeit outside of Parliament, or just as much outside of Parliament as within it. But as it currently stands, we are doing neither. We still do not have a proper constitution. We still do not have local elected candidates, which we should have had. Every constituency should have had someone who was voted in and would have the support of the party to literally call their local MP to account on everything. Our local MP here in Northampton North voted to end and cut the winter fuel allowance. Who would have ever thought that? But not just me, anybody who could have been a duly elected Reform UK candidate for Northampton North could have really torn her to pieces for this. But nobody can, because we don't have an official opposition parliamentary candidate for Northampton North, or anywhere else for that matter, and that is fundamentally wrong. I understand that they've set their sights on the local elections next May, but having a local elected candidate shouldn't interfere with the recruitment of candidates to stand in the local elections next year. But it just seems to me that it is all about whatever they decide policy will be, and the candidates and the supporters are not really getting a very good explanation whatsoever. But from what I'm picking up from people who have been in touch, and there has been a steady stream all day, the comments made on GB News by Richard Tice today, for many, was the last straw. And indeed, I have had emails from people who said that they would be cancelling their membership immediately. Some of them not only have been paying their membership, but they have been paying a monthly donation to the party to support it, and that's going to stop as well. And that's such a shame, because we fought so hard, and it doesn't matter whether we make it as MPs or not. It's not about that. And it doesn't matter whether in this constituency, whether it would be me or someone else. More likely it would be someone else, perhaps someone who can hold their tongue a little bit more and do as they're told, because I'll never do as I'm told. That's fair enough. It is about the fight for our freedom of speech, which we have lost. The fight for our sovereignty, our borders, all the things that are important to us, and all the things that have not just been eroded, that are effectively being destroyed head on by this collection of insidious closet Marxists. Roy again, indeed, he has been neutered. Maybe it is the establishment, but unless he grows a pair and starts using his oratory skills, he will divide the centre-right into three factions. I think that may have already happened, Roy, because ardent supporters of reform, be they local members, be they former candidates, and I say the word former candidates because many of them I feel won't be standing again, but also a lot of the popular names on social media, on YouTube, who were ardent supporters of reform, have today come out and said that that's the end. This was it today, that they have, Richard Tice today has wrecked the party. So that's tragic, because split two ways, there could have possibly been a fight back to get this horrid administration out. But split three ways, I don't know how that can be done, to be honest. And this is Darren Wimbledon. Good to see you this evening, Anthony. Really agree with what you're saying. Reform has let us down big time. Good evening, Darren. Guys, I'm sorry I've not been live over the last few weeks. Hopefully you will understand, because I tend to just say things how they are. I used to consider that to be a virtue, but now I consider it to be a threat to myself, because there was a period where I was beginning to worry about what I'm saying, and I never ever thought that we would reach a time where I'm speaking up about my country. I'm speaking up about what we can do for our old to not become the victim of a malicious equity raid, for our young people to have options in their careers, studying, etc., and that they shouldn't all be ushered into universities. Well, I don't call most of them universities now. They used to be centres of education. They are now centres of Marxist indoctrination. And I think it's tragic that many of these young people can't even afford to rent, let alone buy. And isn't it ironic that often the ones who are most hostile to us, who are fighting for them, are the very people who we are fighting for? In fact, I met with one Labour supporter a couple of weeks ago, lovely young lad, and he's disillusioned with Labour. And I didn't hold back in saying that I have shirts older than him, and yet it was he and his generation who were giving me the most grief for fighting for them. I didn't need to step up and put myself out in the media firing line, but I did because I want to fight for them. And now I intend to fight for the older people and their winter fuel allowance. It's not just the winter fuel allowance, even though it is about that. For me, I see it as the thin end of the wedge, because over the last decade, Labour and Conservatives alike, let's not give them the privilege of differentiating them, they have been nurturing a generation of entitled, resentful and disrespectful people, not all of course, who feel that they have a right to take from older people who've worked all their lives. And there's a reason that this is happening, because they are desperate to plunder the equity and the wealth of the over 60s. And this winter fuel allowance was the thin end of the wedge, was just the starting point, the litmus test, a political and social litmus test to see if they can get away with it, which is why they introduced it so early on, because in their opinion, the British public are a soft touch, and if we repeat the lie and the justification enough times, by the next election it will be long forgotten. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't care if they're in power for a decade, it will not be forgotten. Hence the reason that every day I published a photo of an MP who voted to cut the winter fuel allowance. And I intend to make it my hobby to make this shadow them with shame for the rest of their lives. Not concerned with somebody tweeting their opinion. That's the politics of Marxism. A resentment of free speech. People are free to speak, that's absolutely fine. But this was an act, politics of resentment, and this is a toxic streak running through Whitehall, and we must fight against it, because, as I said, it's the thin end of the wedge. And I was hoping that our boys, if we're going to call them our boys, perhaps boys is the right word for them, would be kicking up merry hell about this. But they don't seem to be doing anything. Mark, was a big Reform Party member just suspended tonight. I understand, Mark, and you're not alone. And imagine how it feels having fought, not just myself, but all of these people who fought a campaign in good faith, who took stick from the media. And if you've been following me, you know that I've had my fair share. Financed it themselves, printing, meetings, transport, you name it, all in good faith, to be slapped in the face like this by Tice today, by Nigel Farage the other day. I don't want Conservative councillors to move over to Reform because they were invited politely with a letter. Because if they don't have the decency to resign from the Conservatives of their own accord, they're no good to us. They're no good to anybody. Tracy, after that insult from Tice earlier, I'm done. I completely understand, and I'm really sorry. And thank you for joining me, Tracy. And you know, there are so many other issues that are being ignored because of the political climate that we're in. Let's not go down the usual route, but because there are so many, and we know what they are. I have to say, how many people can you think of in the media now who actually have the balls to speak up? There's a few. There's our friend Maya, who always comes out with the truth. Jeff Taylor, good old Katie Hopkins. But in mainstream media, one of the very, very few who I can think of who has the balls to say it as it is Alex Phillips on Talk TV. She is absolutely amazing. She has more balls than most of the men in mainstream media put together. And I hope that she's always safe, that she's not attacked personally in any way, physically, professionally, politically, whatever it is, because I know that the establishment don't like voices like hers on mainstream media. But the sad thing is that it has now been eroded into just a handful of people. Paul Thorpe, another one. Not many left now. Really, really not many left. Everyone else has effectively sold their soul to the devil, and they'll just go along with the narrative. Mainstream media, as we know, it's gone. Whether it's Sky News, BBC of course, Channel 4. Talking of Sky News, I don't know, you would obviously have to be like in your mid to late 50s to remember, but 3 or 4 decades ago, Kay Burley was, if you like, the star of Sky News. She was almost like a beacon for female empowerment. I even remember one of the newspapers doing an article about it. It might have been The Sun, Kay's Day, and there was a feature about her and a photo of her in a yellow Mazda MX-5 or something like that. Fast forward 2-3 decades, and it's crystal clear that she just sold her soul to the devil. And all we see from her is condescending hypocrisy and an arrogant and blatant repetition of the narrative without any thought whatsoever to the consequences of what she is supporting and encouraging. And she's just one of many. Nothing personal, but from a professional point of view, if you're watching, or if you ever watch, you're a disgrace. And Alex Phillips can run circles around you. Okay, who do we have now? Bluebell, hello. I won't ever be voting Reform again. Saw a post on Paz 49 today and read a comment this guy had put on what Tice has been saying on Jeremy Vine show. Don't like Anne Widdecombe comments either. Yes, I'm afraid you're not alone. We're all quite sad because here's how it is, everyone. The nutters at number 10 may very well think that their carte blanche threats and this psychopath's abuse and misuse of the judicial system to imprison people for their opinion whilst freeing people for violent crimes and ignoring violent crimes. And on that note, do we know what happened to those two who attacked that innocent policewoman at Manchester Airport? Why haven't they been tried, found guilty and thrown in jail? Just on that note. But if they think that because it's gone quiet, it is because the British public has capitulated quietly and just accepted the status quo, then I'm afraid they have another thing coming, because the British public is getting angry quietly, angrier than ever. And perhaps in a certain way, reform thus far has been contributing to keeping people calm, because reform was giving people hope. But today, with what we heard, for many that hope has now been extinguished. And if the masses out there, and it is the masses, as I've said, 80% of the electorate did not vote for these virtue signalling hypocrites, then I can see some serious consequences over the next few weeks or months or whenever, because there will come a tipping point where people will have had enough. At what point are we going to ignore everything that is happening? Issues that, once again, sorry to mention her again, but she's the only one that did. Alex Phillips made a point that there are streets in London where, as a blonde woman, she cannot walk down that street safely. Is this the country that we love? What has become to of the country that we love? And more importantly, at what point are we going to stand up for this slide into misogyny on a national scale, which has been exacerbated by ethnic and political and religious influences from the Dark Ages? Caroline Smith, hello. I've been hanging on for Reform UK to be the party we all hoped for. I canvassed, put myself on the line, and for what? Reform are showing themselves to be Tories and now actively absorbing the Tories. Yes, going back to the point I said earlier, we keep hearing all the time there's going to be no deal with the Tories. And I have been asking myself, why is this being said all the time? And I know it's satire, but if you are or ever have been a fan of Yes Minister, then one of the famous quotes in Yes Minister is, "You mustn't believe anything until it's been officially denied. Then we know it's true." And perhaps in the climate we're in, never a truer word. Oh, have I missed something here? Sorry if I missed you. Question. Right. Okay, Roy. Sky News Australia is where you need to look for anti-establishment commentary. They do not hold back. Yes, they do. And I can't remember her name, but there's a woman on there who has a really cute nose and a really cute attitude, and she's absolutely hilarious, and I really like them a lot, and I think they're fantastic. I completely agree with you. Isn't it amazing how Sky News Australia is so different to Sky News that we have here? Bluebell 100 Shirley. Okay. And what's the next one? Paula, I love that woman. Alex is a real good tonic. Isn't she just absolutely wonderful? I completely agree. Like I said, she really says it how it is. Now, Alex used to be a spokesperson for Reform, as did Dr. David Bull. I don't know what happened there with those two, but definitely Alex can say it how it is, and she can just reel it off, and you know that what she's saying is impassioned and it is what she believes. She's not just saying what she feels will sound good. Darren Wimbledon. What is Reform offering anyone? Who will vote for them now? Perhaps we should campaign outside the local conferences they are organising. I don't know what to do for the best. Personally, myself, I wanted, as you know, I wanted to try and organise local people because I wanted the local supporters to be able to vote in a new candidate, and I've even been trying to encourage people to stand. Doesn't matter who gets in as long as that person has the mandate of the people, and may the best person win. And I'd love to see young, old, male and female. I want to see a choice, and I want to see democracy. And we've been fobbed off again and again and again and again, and I don't know why. I don't know what to say to anyone now, and I don't even know who really we should be pushing for change here. I don't know what the best thing to do is, because option A, we abandon ship. But if we abandon ship, what are the alternatives? Option B, we fight from within. How are we going to do that if we have this atmosphere of effectively control on what we say? Because trust me, I have been told to shut up and stay shut up on several occasions, but I won't do that because I don't care. I'm not here to just win favours. I'm here to say what I believe is right or wrong. And if it doesn't suit them, if that won't get me into, as an MP, then so what? If I were able to have managed it, wow, what a huge privilege that would have been. But I would only like to get in there if I know that I would have permission to run riot. If I'm just going to be there and be another one of their Muppets, then I don't want to be there at all. And Paula, what that makes sense. Okay, next one. Putting concerned citizens away and letting out real criminals. Unbelievable. Absolutely. And which of them has mentioned that poor guy who took his own life? For those of you who don't know, his offence was shouting aggressively at a police dog, effectively. But what they don't tell you is that they threw him in a prison with the very people who would have nothing but contempt for him, so that he would be attacked every day and he couldn't tolerate it anymore, and he took his own life. This is somebody who's never done anything wrong, who just felt passionate about his country, and this is what they did to him. The very people who have been subjecting us to their virtue signalling comments over the last few years. I'm sure you're all aware Starmer's angle was normally reading a letter from someone, wasn't it? You know, Mrs. Jones can't understand why she couldn't get in to see her mother while Boris Johnson ate a slice of cake, for example. And his gathering with beer and curries wasn't a party. Reluctantly, I'd have to agree with that, because no gathering in the presence of that psychopath could ever be a party, could it? But this is where we are now. And you may have noticed that he has toned down his threats, and that is because I believe behind the scenes he's desperately running around trying to hide some bombshells from hitting the media, but nothing that we can say, certainly not at this time. Mr. Blaze, yes, Reform just committed political suicide by throwing Tommy under the bus. The people support Tommy more than they do Reform. Yes, I'm inclined to agree with you. As I said, I was in London yesterday for a meeting. I couldn't make it, but I was at the last one, and it was a huge privilege to be there. And I was also in Whitehall on St George's Day, and I watched from across the road as people in a pub were basically raided aggressively and provoked into reacting, and the media just happened to be there to capture the reaction. But it was played out, reaction before the aggressive advance into the pub, so that it would further inflame the far left morons into aggressive response. And then we had August the 7th, the greatest false flag in recent political history, where there were going to be far right riots throughout the country, if you remember. But in actual fact, it was just a national series of far left demonstrations. That was the day that Labour councillor made that comment, if you remember. But something that hasn't been mentioned, and I have to tread carefully about this because there are people who have been incarcerated for saying too much about this topic. I would urge you to cast your minds back to that date. August the 7th was the date a certain attacker was going to turn 18. And on that date, realistically, they would have been free to release an up-to-date image of him. But by sheer coincidence, there were going to be riots throughout the country on that day. And all mainstream media talked about all day was the false flag. Not one of them actually even asked, hey, that attacker was 18 today. Where's an up-to-date photo? More importantly, he is 18. Well, he was 18 a week ago when he committed that attack. Why hasn't anybody turned up who sat on a bus with him, who ran a corner shop where he went to buy things, who liked him, disliked him, had issues with him, sold him a television, sold him a kebab? Not one. What are the odds that an adult would commit such a heinous crime and not one person turns up who knows him? Very strange, isn't it? That's all I can say for the moment. Anyway, next one. Very proud to be British yesterday at the United Kingdom rally. Minute silence for Peter Cheshire. You could hear a pin drop. Caroline, I know exactly how it feels, and I do wish I could have been there, but I felt the same at the last one in Trafalgar Square. Poor Peter, bless his soul. Absolutely. Reform is finished. After what he said about that lot, without Tommy's backing, Reform will lose 1 million votes, if not more. And what's this next one? Reform has lost all the support on Paul Thorpe channel tonight. He has a vast audience. Yes, he does. I mentioned him a little earlier, and obviously you watched it. I had to skirt through it because it went on for about an hour and a half, and I have to fit it in. But yes, completely agree with you. And I think that the proverbial genie is out the bottle now. And like I said, I had a stream of emails from voters and supporters who have made it clear that they are cancelling their membership, cancelling their donations in 1 or 2 cases, and won't be voting for them again. Reform don't want to support that lot. We don't want them. Thank you for joining me, Stephanie, and I completely understand why. Nigel Tice has just put another nail in your coffin by his apparent comments regarding Tommy Robinson. Yes, I completely agree. And it feels as though us who were candidates feel like sitting ducks because we've just been hit from all directions, and now we're all asking ourselves, what was it all for? Because we fought with such passion and such enthusiasm, and for this to happen, it's it's really, really disheartening, for us, for the members, and for voters in general. Paula, Caroline, you should all be really proud. Wish I'd been there. It took bravery to go, in my opinion. Absolutely, and I am, and I'm sure we are all very proud of everyone who has been. It we I think we can take heart that these gatherings are increasing in size exponentially, and hopefully, as time goes by and more people attend and more people speak up, then the pressure to roll back on all the misinformation about Tommy Robinson will hopefully reveal just how far they have gone to try and silence him and anyone else who dares to reveal what they are really doing. And this is crucial. It's not just about us, it's also about our OAPs, and more importantly, or just as importantly, sorry, for our young people who are being manipulated, who are being indoctrined, who are suffering climate anxiety, who think it's the end of the world, who have no hope, who have very little opportunity to rent, let alone buy, and who are being lined up to be pawns in some sort of globalist agenda that we must fight against with everything we have while we can. Paula, it looked epic, the most important march ever. Darren Wimbledon, can we campaign for a posthumous pardon for Peter? We need focus. The uniting UK movement needs tangible stuff to chew on. I'd like that actually, Darren, and I completely agree with you. As I said, I'm trying to focus. I'm looking for things that I can do, and I'm trying to focus on the winter fuel allowance. And I am trying to find out more about all of these people who have been thrown in prison. I do believe that this was a blatant misuse of the judicial system. I believe that orders from the top were given for these people to be bullied into pleading guilty. Mainly, I believe that many were told if they do not plead guilty that they would be on remand for months and months and months. So they plead guilty, it's televised, and they were thrown in jail. Probably the last thing they expected. But there you go. And I'm not talking about those who were just blatant hooligans. That's happened before. It will happen again. That was not the majority. That was a few, the minority, as always. Kim Thomas, Reform are doing great. They have more members than the Tories now. I wouldn't support any group that tried to bully me and TR's team, including PT, tried to force Reform to yield to their will. Yes, well, I don't know how Reform will be doing a few days from now as this sinks in, or rather the consequences of what's happened today and over the last week with Nigel's video stating that he's going to be writing to over 1,000 Conservative councillors, effectively pleading with them to move over to Reform. I can't think of anything more ridiculous than doing that, to be honest. Some months ago, Richard Tice bent his knee to hope not hate. Why was that not a red flag for everyone? It most certainly was for me. Yes, I do remember that. 3 Reform candidates were removed after that disturbed person, Nick Lowles from Hope Not Hate, went for them. And yet, a month or two ago, you may be aware, he put out a tweet that far-right activists were throwing acid on people in Manchester. And the next day, he put up a tweet, oops, I was wrong. There have been so many incidents of him. I mean, this is the classic. I don't know. Was he bullied at school? Does he have certain issues that we can't discuss on air? Was he a prefect? Well, I don't know what his problem is, but he is definitely our national, a quintessential example of a national troubled, bitter, twisted person. I voted Reform last time. I wish I'd voted Conservative to keep out Labour. Good evening, Andrew. Thank you for joining. And yes, I mentioned that a little earlier. Us standing for reform collectively gave Labour this huge majority. They would have won anyway, no matter what. But as I said, we may have cost the Conservatives 50 to 100 seats, who knows, somewhere around there. And for that reason, we have a duty of responsibility individually and collectively to fight on behalf of the people against this administration, one MP at a time. We should already be in a position, united with a common goal, constituency by constituency, each one of us targeting that MP in that particular constituency and holding them to account. That's what we should be doing. And instead of that, we need to justify ourselves because we support somebody who was good enough before the election to encourage his supporters, numbering, I'm sure, over 1 million, to vote for reform. Richard Tice has offended no one. Why would reform have anything to do with Tommy Robinson, a drughead who spends his donations on chems? Some of us know what's going on, and Paul and co. all shills. Okay, well, you are entitled to your opinion, of course. I'd be more comfortable with it if we had, I've said this before, haven't I? If we had a name, if we had a photo, and you would be just the person that I'd love for you to join me live to have your say. I'd love to hear it. But isn't it strange how those who simply want to throw stones often seem to do it anonymously? So if you want to stand by what you've just said, and especially about Tommy Robinson, feel free to message, and I'd be happy to have you on here live so you can say exactly what you think. Can we all call out Labour MPs in the morning? Make sure Mike, the drunk Labour MP, is fast-tracked to court. 10 years should cover that crime. Yes, we should. And what are the chances of that, I wonder? A national acrobat. Ever heard the saying about keeping your enemies close? There is a huge story on HNH being exposed with Labour and American Democrats. Yes, it seems that a large number of councillors are allegedly over in the US conducting some research, but it has been alleged that they're actually trying to give that nutter Kamala a helping hand. Well, we've only got another 9 days until the election. Is it on the 6th? When is the US election? It's in the next couple of weeks, isn't it? Then we'll see. 3 more councillors have defected to reform. Yes, Yes, we have had that. Now, councillors who decide to resign, to stand down of their own accord and change who they want to be allied with is one thing. But asking councillors who aren't prepared to simply resign because they disagree with their party to move to reform is effectively taking reform and merging it with the Conservatives in one way or another by the back door. That, to me, is taking reform voters for fools when at this very same time we keep hearing no deals with the Conservatives. What exactly does that mean then? No deals with whoever the next leader is? No deals with MPs? Because by the sound of things, if Conservative MPs wanted to move to reform, they would take them all. So what exactly, which part of no deals with the Conservatives are they referring to? Or is it simply about the name? Or who the leader is, of course. Tommy is Alexei Navalny, and Stalin Starmer wants to silence him. He's already silenced Peter Lynch. Yeah, Starmer is, he's a psychopath. That's it. He's the closest thing to an android that I have seen. No emotion, no integrity, no compassion, no humility whatsoever. He gives that blank stare, answers a totally different question to the one he is asked. And, sorry, but what kind of man would allow another man to buy him £36,000 worth of clothes? Or worse, what kind of man would allow another man to buy his wife's clothes and go and stay in his apartment for however long and stage that apartment for him to make a video to tell people to stay in their homes to appear that he's in his own homes when he's in Mr. Ali's apartment? I don't know what he was doing in Mr. Ali's apartment, although Katie Hopkins has made a few suggestions if you'd care to look her up. We have to wait for the investigation on Peter Lynch. Yes, let's see. I don't believe that he should have been in prison anyway at all. Good evening, Stephanie. No chance. The only time Starmer will bend is if Ali is behind. Yeah. Have you been talking to Katie Hopkins, Stephanie? Okay. Deborah. Westminster now is looking like a cult, all serving outside masters, just subbed. Yes, they are so arrogant that they really truly believe that they are a law unto themselves. And on top of that, in 4 days' time, less than 4, this Wednesday, we have the budget. Let's see what they have in store for us then. And once again, I'm sure we will hear from Rachel Reeves about this 20 billion black hole that they didn't know about, but they did, that they created. Then we've got Ed Miliband. Need I say more? And I assume that, if Angela Rayner does have the chance to speak at any point, all we hear from Angela Rayner is they crushed the economy. No Spud Man. Alexei Navalny was involved with the CIA. Good evening, Margaret. Reform is finished. It's a takedown of reform which has failed. You're all being played by Actors Shield, paid for by the government. Well, many of us do feel or are wondering, were we simply just pawns in a game to just take down the Conservatives or for some other agenda? I don't know. I don't know what's been going on. Everything that's happened in recent years seems to be very sinister. The The changes in leadership in the Conservatives were all raised question marks. The placement of Fishy Rishi again raised question marks because he was the one who the people above actually wanted. We can see, or we're aware, of the concessions that he made in various ways in the year that he was in power. And I think it's fair to say that his greatest achievement was to totally trash the Conservative Party, to call an election 6 months, 5 months sooner than he needed to. With that announcement, stood out in the rain, looking all pathetic and defeated. Was there a reason to that? Was his role to simply trash the Conservative Party so that this psychopath could get in and further sell the country down the proverbial river? I don't know, but I can't say categorically that we haven't all been taken for fools. Really, I can't now, not after this week. Yes, Tice and Farage have just lost thousands of voters. Good evening, Steve. So it's back to UPIC again. Good evening, Bob. Well, apparently their support is picking up. I really don't know. And again, as somebody mentioned earlier, what chance would a three-way split of the centre-right have? Very little. And this plays right into the hands of the Labour Party. And that being the case, then we must ask ourselves, why did Richard Tice respond to that question the way that he did today? Why did he, and prior to him, Farage has done it as well, why have they blatantly insulted Tommy Robinson supporters, knowing that they are Reform, generally, mainly Reform UK supporters? Nobody's saying that they had to go on the record supporting Tommy Robinson, standing by him politically, etc. But did they need to speak about him the way that they did? Was there any need for them to actually just join in the media bandwagon and throw mud at Tommy Robinson when they know that Reform and those of us who stood as candidates for Reform suffered the same just a few months ago? But we took it because we were fighting for what we believed in. Roy Everts. Raum vetted their candidates with hope not hate. That should have been a red flag for everyone. Yes, there were about 3 on the trot that went thanks to hope not hate. So many people are triggered by hurty words. TR is one piece of a much bigger whole. Yes, and good evening, Kim. Caroline, Nick Lowles, all of the above. Have you seen the video of him out on the YouTube performing dinosaur impressions? No, I haven't seen that, but I'd be grateful if you would send me a link. Failing that, I'll go and find it. Nothing would surprise me from him at all. Shelley, good evening. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it ourselves. Okay? In that regard, when you refer to the opposition, are you referring to the Labour Party in power now? Are you referring to the Conservatives? Or are you suggesting that we should try to take control of Reform? Because, as Ben Habib quite rightly pointed out, this constitution that has been released or was released at the conference doesn't actually grant the members the right to remove the leader. So in reality, I'm not sure how democratic it really is. Kim Thomas, I'm not going back to UKIP. They didn't even get any votes in the Runcorn constituency. Reform came second, and now there is going to be a by-election. More division, isn't it? They are like Peter denying Christ. Tice and Farage are finished. And good evening, Paul. And I think they have done. I'm increasingly having the feeling that they have caused irreparable damage today and this week. Sylvie, good evening. Farage and Tice have showed their true colours. They are a fake party, just part of the establishment. Fun fact, voting is not going to change things in the UK. Completely agree. First and foremost, the most important part for me and for most people was democracy. Starting from the very bottom, street by street, to local areas, regional, working its way up to government. We don't have a proper functioning democracy, and where there are major issues, why shouldn't the people be able to vote on them? And do we need to have postal votes, which are obviously abused and so corrupt? Why can we not just log into our .gov account and be able to once a month cast a vote on some of the most important issues? And it could be effectively set up in such a way where the vast majority of votes in a constituency would exceed the one vote of the MP, so that the people really did have democracy. But they wouldn't allow that because, as the saying goes, and I forgot who said it, so feel free to remind me, if they thought we could change things, they wouldn't let us vote. Bluebell, I persuaded every member of my family to vote for reform. They won't be voting for them now. They are treating the working class like Labour. Kim Thomas, I've met people in reform that are also supporters of Tommy. It is better to be within reform. They won't be leaving. Yes, if you have been to any of the gatherings, they really, really are the salt of the earth, Tommy Robinson supporters. And I was humbled when I went to the last one. And yes, there were many reform supporters there, and there were reform candidates there, one or two of which have been suspended just for showing support for Tommy Robinson. What right do they have to do that to somebody who spent time and money and effort to fight on behalf of the party and the people of their constituency? When a candidate stands in a constituency, as far as I am concerned, it is the people of that constituency who matter most. And yet, like the other parties, Reform has now decided to just dismiss them. So the question is, was what Tice said today no different to the day when Free Gear Keir stood there and called everyone who protested far right? What's the difference? Martin, good evening. People need to stop looking for people to lead them. Lead yourself. Yes, but we do need to have true functioning democracy for that to happen, because no individual or collection of individuals can ever be trusted with absolute control. There is only one way to keep the leadership in check, and that is if we ensure at all times that they are accountable to the people. And everything that they have done is to ensure that they are less and less accountable to the people, so that they can divide the people, they can threaten the people, and they can bully them so that they can do as they wish. Steve Edwards, good evening. I'm Reform and Tommy supporter. After Tice comments, Reform can do one. Understand completely. Kaz, hello Kaz, hi from Yorkshire, one of the nicest parts of the country. Kim Thomas, Runcorn MP attacker has been suspended from the Labour Party. Terry Jacob, good evening. Tice has totally blown it for reform. I'm getting the feeling that that's the case. Today, there was already issues, as I've said, with what Nigel Farage has done and a few things along the way. Ben Habib just being thrown out, not even spared the courtesy of a meeting beforehand. Going by the response, I have a feeling that he wasn't even aware, and the first he heard of it was in the media. Somebody comes along and makes a large donation and seems to just leapfrog everyone and become director, which doesn't pass the smell test for me. But today may very well be RIP reform. I said previously they should give Farage and Tice the boot and get Ben Habib in. Watch reform then. Shirley Hunt. Ben Habib is an absolutely wonderful guy. He actually attended, I think, 2 of my meetings here in Northampton because obviously he was standing in Wellingborough. He knows his stuff. He really, really does. He could talk for quite a while. In fact, he went on before me because he had to leave. And in fact, he spoke for so long that he ran the battery flat in the wireless microphone. Lucky there was a spare. But Ben Habib is absolutely wonderful. And it's not just words. He has demonstrated with legal fights that he has taken on. He has demonstrated what loyalty and patriotism for this country really mean. And he also is an embodiment of what it means to be British. And he clearly shows what reform is or should be all about, and how it is nothing to do with race and colour. It is to do with our nationality, our national identity, and our love for our nation. That's what matters, and no one can rank higher than Ben Habib in that regard. The American Democrat Labour Party story is far bigger. They've been conspiring against our people for 30 years. Yes, and I think there's more to come out. There's more to come out there. Yes, I'm sure he is, Martin. Another fun fact. The American deep state will not allow Trump back into the White House. You'd better believe it. It wouldn't surprise me. Really, really, it would not surprise me. So I can't disagree with you there. Sylvie, they are traitors, aren't they just? And Deborah Hart, they're all traitors. I think we're seeing a pattern here, aren't we? Anthony Antonio doing his best to discredit reform, wake up people, the government are themselves, and using shields to badmouth reform. Okay, if that's what you think I'm doing, just for your information, I have actually been devoting a lot of my time behind the scenes to meet people one at a time, face to face, who have had questions. And guess what? Nearly everybody who I've met has actually, after meeting and speaking with me, been more, if not completely, inclined to support reform. So no. And if there is any anger or frustration in my voice, it is from somebody who stood and fought vehemently for reform, and I am angry at what is happening now. So Take that as you wish. You are so short-sighted. What if some of those people that defected to reform were already known to Nigel and they infiltrated the Tory party until the opportunity arose for them to defect? Okay, so are you suggesting that some of the councillors and or MPs who stood for the Conservatives are Conservatives who are secretly Reform supporters, who would then choose to defect to Reform? Well, I suppose anything is possible, but in my experience, I can think of one or two people within Reform who are known to me personally, who couldn't be a more negative influence on the party, even if they were secret closet Conservatives. Anything is possible. It's a dirty business. Why are people surprised about Starmer? The guy just said it. He is a psychopath. Absolutely he is. And I have had lots of people email in saying exactly the same thing. Things are not always as they appear to be. That is for certain. And who knows what is really going on here. Things are not all always as they seem. They're all pulling together. Well, I'm not the first one to say the silence from the Reform hierarchy has been thunderous, and when they have spoken out in recent weeks, they've done more harm than good. Stephanie, don't know what you mean. Okay. Cliff Robinson, Anthony, just found your site brilliant. Thank you very, very much. I do try and get as much as I can out. Just for the record, the .co.uk is where I write all my politics. .com is everything to do with property. Just for the record, I'm not sure which one you found, but I do hope that there's articles that will be of interest to you there. Okay, Tice and his party have just shown their woke WEF party as controlled opposition. I'm not able to argue anything now. Really, I can't after today. I feel so sorry for all the normal people who work so hard on the ground to go out and campaign and get the votes for reform, all for Nigel and Tice to throw it all away. And good evening. And yes, I agree. Because the election was sort of thrust on us as a surprise, most of us just literally hit the ground running, standing start, had no campaign team, no funds in place, nothing. So it was very, very difficult. And as we got into the campaign after a couple of weeks, people were emailing in, offering to go and give out flyers, offering to help in every way that they could. People who were placing their faith in something better, as we all were. For me, as I said, the frustration began immediately after the election. There were some issues on a personal level even before, because I didn't want to just bore people with video after video just talking about we're going to stop the boats and raise income tax to 20,000. We're going to stop the boats and raise income tax to 20,000. Because I can think of a few candidates not too far away from me who were the most boring people I've ever had to suffer listening to. So if you watched, I wanted to make live streams to discuss everything from the increase of misogyny, from violence, education, opportunities for young people, housing, and so on and so forth. And just as we were approaching the election, I was effectively just told to just shut up and just stick to these 2 or 3 boring points like a good boy, which I wouldn't do, of course. And I do feel sorry for the people who gave so much. And immediately after the election, when this democracy that we were promised didn't materialise, I said, well, we stood down anyway, because when the election was over, we weren't even told this is how our path working forwards is going to be, and for the main part, you should continue to be the candidate, or we're going to have elections, local elections, so that people can choose their candidates. I'm happy with either, but I wasn't happy with no man's land, not knowing where we stand, no official recognition for the huge effort that we had made, and most importantly of all the effort that the people had put in, basically amounting to nothing. There should at least have been something organised to fight against these insidious people who are in power now. Joanna is awful, isn't she just? Steve, good evening. You can't trust any of them. They lost my membership and vote. Hit the likes and subs, guys. Face red heart shape. Thank you, Darren. Martin, don't think the West is under a global governance. They just haven't announced it. Scorpio, good evening. We voted them in, then they start transferring the garbage we've just got rid of. Was Farage planted to split the vote? I don't trust any of them. I'm not voting. Politically homeless, wefers. I think that there are many people feeling politically homeless this evening, I'm afraid. Luke, good evening. It's really too early to throw the towel in with reform. There are under 20% of the country's votes, and the race tagged by the media has to be washed away. Tommy's name by many of the public has been tarnished. Yes, I understand that. By the media has been tarnished. But even so, I believe that today has caused irreparable damage, I'm afraid, or it's looking that it has done. Hate not hope to toe-sucking Tice. I'm off to the UKIP nutters. Deborah, 14th of August 2022, Starmer tweeted, looking ahead to winter, I met pensioners who have no idea how they will heat their homes. His tweet, this budget will be the end of GB. His job is to crash GB. Yes, what a hypocrite. It's absolute disgrace. Who would have thought we would have a Labour in the first winter of a Labour government, the first in 14 years, that locally I'm out, as are some of my colleagues, trying to orchestrate warm spaces for older people who may be freezing to death this winter. An estimated 4,000, is it, by their own research, and yet they still go ahead with it. A drop in the ocean compared to what they are throwing down the drain elsewhere, which I'm sure you're aware of. Need I say more? Kim Thomas, Tories didn't want reform to have another 6 months on the ground before the general election. Yes, I understand that, of course, but still, it still didn't ring right to me. I still have this horrible feeling that Rishi was just there to just run the Conservative Party into the ground, but who knows. Goldilocks, we need Ben Habib. Ben is wonderful. I don't know what he's doing. Hopefully I will catch up with him soon because I'd like to know. Let's see. I think it's a case of watch this space at the moment. Sarah Pike, good evening. We need a new start, new politicians, not any uni-party men. The sad thing is that look what's happened now. Who would have thought it? This was supposed to be a new start. This was supposed to be freedom of speech. Look at the contract with the people. I think it's on the first page. It talks about free speech, and their actions suggest anything but free speech. I don't know what the hell's going on here. Kim, Anthony, the media have tried to put the blame for the riots onto Nigel and Reform. Oh, absolutely. I'm fully aware of what the media have done. Yes, you're absolutely right. In fact, they were even calling them the Farage riots, weren't they? But again, I think that this was something where fire needed to be fought with fire. And again, I think that through that period, it was more about self-preservation than actually addressing the hypocrisy of the government and their part in people being pushed to the point that they would spill out on the streets in anger. Lou at Fernley. You need to read, watch and question everything. Also look up history of politics and parties and the history of your country. Reform just had to be quiet and let things move on, but they messed up. All on the gravy train, traitors. That's from Scorpio. And Stephanie again, we need reform with Ben, Lee, Andrew, Farage and Time. And Time should resign in the interest of the Reform Party with Ben. Oh, right, okay, so we need reform with Ben, Lee, Andrew, Farage and Time should resign. Well, you probably won't be alone with that opinion. Great Brit. The simple answer is yes. They proved they want the acceptance of the Tories and their donors. So what have we done? Have we just gone round in one expensive, tiring, stressful circle back to square one? The difference being that Farage will literally have control of the Conservative Party, directly or indirectly. I'm not sure. Martin, Tice, the guy who supported the COVID agenda and the poison, come on, how could anyone trust such a character? A national acrobat. I am Europe's last hope. If I lose this war, then Europe is finished. The Austrian painter, 1939. Bluebell. Tommy backed reform all the way during the election. Yes, he did. After throwing him under the bus, he endorsed UKIP on Maya Tuzi. I think Maya Tuzi was live on this a little earlier. I haven't watched it yet. So I'll be interested to hear his take on things today. Luke, need to see sense. No country back without a reformed government, even if what's said is all accurate. So what do we do? How do we play it? Do we literally fight from within to ensure that what we all supported, voted for, and what we won actually is put into practice? Perhaps that may be the best way. I don't know. Deborah Hart, you do not pay taxes for proxy wars, treason, tyranny. No, we don't. Starlight sign, not a single person at the march would get elected. They have to do it their way. They do indeed. Ken Hampshire, good evening. Reform has joined the establishment uni party. No matter who you vote for, you will be disappointed. Well, I have to say that when the camera pans through Parliament now, I always, and I've said this before, I'm always reminded of the last paragraph of George Orwell's Animal Farm, when the animals looked through the window and they couldn't tell the pigs from the men apart. That's how it is now. When the camera pans through Parliament, I can't tell the Conservatives from the Labour MPs, them or from the SDP. I mean, what did the SDP do? They're just oxygen thieves, wasting everybody's time and confusing things. But you can't tell them all apart. They might as well all be part of the Labour Party, for as far as I'm concerned. The truth. Yep, they're screwing themselves while Labour are gifting them 29 already. Goldilocks. At least the Conservatives looked after the pensioners. Yes, isn't it ironic that it was the Conservatives that made quite a few changes that did help OAPs, and that Labour, by their first move, showed their true colours. And as I said earlier on, we have to fight against this fuel allowance cut because I believe it's the thin end of the wedge. This is a political litmus test by Labour to see if they can get away with plundering the OAPs because they're desperate to get their hands on it. And people like Starmer hate the OAPs and their assets. He hates this country. He hates the culture. He hates our independent schools. He really, really is one of the most toxic men in recent history. Kim, the Tommy issue destroyed UKIP last time. That must not happen again with reform. Perhaps reform need all the supporters, members, voters to literally come down on them like a ton of bricks and demand that they see the error in their ways immediately before they are sunk permanently. Great Brit, they don't even need to back Tommy. Just stop acting like lefties and lying about him. Agreed. Okay, even though that may not be right in the current climate, we can understand that they can't go on and agree with him and openly support him or whatever the case may be. But they don't need to throw him under the bus. They don't need to join the media in literally labelling him far right. Did Nigel like it through the riots when he was constantly called far right and they were called the Farage riots? So why is he doing it to somebody else? It's all set in stone. We don't have a say. No democracy. No, we do not have a democracy, and that's really important. Justice done. Unsubbed reform, Nigel and Tice membership cancelled. Betrayed by every party I've voted for, so my vote can go in the bin for as long as I'm on this earth. Bob Eastwood, good evening. Tommy for PM, that'll work. Sarah Pike, come over to Tommy Robinson's party. I will pay my deposit. Already drafting the leaflets and posters. Daz, good evening. I'm starting to think Tories weren't that bad. Kim Thomas, the previous reform candidates not selected by branches previously, not vetted properly either. However, things have changed. By the way, I've supported and defended Tommy since 2010. Lord Niblick III, trust in Jesus. Good evening, sir. Roy Everts, we can't vote for Jesus. Caroline Smith, my comment earlier said Peter Cheshire, not Peter Lynch. Sorry. No problem. Understood. We know who you mean. Justice done. Jesus isn't going to pay my bills. Scorpio, they used us, money, greed, power. I was worried when Zia and his money came in. You and me both. Kim Thomas, I like Ben Habib, but he didn't win his seat. Yes, absolutely. But that wasn't really a reason for him to have been removed as deputy leader. I appreciate that the argument was that that the deputy leader would need to be an MP, but there were two deputy leaders before. I still feel that Ben Habib could have and should have had a role in the party. And why couldn't Ben Habib have been made chairman? He is a successful businessman and he earned his role within the party because he was one of the foot soldiers that helped to take the party from a revived, renamed Brexit party to where it was just a few months ago. Victoria Brooks, good evening. Dead and buried themselves on live TV. Robert Thompson, good evening. Totally destroyed themselves. Deborah Hart, there is no democracy. All parties are just business paid by big corporations. This is a war against globalism and the corporations, I'm afraid. And they focus on taking more and more from hard-working people until the corporations own and control everything. And this is where we are going, and it's absolutely tragic. Oh, sorry, I missed this one. Justice done. Election day. Go vote for liars and traitors or stay home with a brew. True. Kim Thomas. Zia wasn't the biggest donor. The biggest donor went back to the Tories. Trump will win. He won in 2022. Traitors, another set of Nessa, and good evening. And Roy Everts. Brexit bot. TV is a bot. They can't spell and doesn't know the difference between your and your. It's fine. And at the end of the day, where would we be without the occasional toxic person? That's all part of it. And to be honest, it's something that we should be prepared for. And I'm not going to waste my time and it will be riled by it. So, yeah, no problem, and you're probably right. Grace, good evening. Trump did his bidding when he highly supported the V. He even bragged about dishing it out to. Just another delivery in the deep state. TTT. Bluebell. Nigel and Tice want to remember the MSM will never back them. Even if Tommy is in prison, the rallies will go on getting bigger each time and reform are finished. UKIP are out on the rally with them. Well, it's going to be interesting to see the dynamics of Tommy Robinson, reform and UKIP over the next few weeks, because I am sensing a real change in the political climate in that area of the political spectrum. Stephanie, Ali pulls Starmer's strings. Is that all he pulls, Stephanie? I don't know. What do you think? Dragonback, TTT, turncoat traitor Tice, a wasted vote. Okay, glad you clarified that because I wasn't really sure. Thank you. Stephanie again, I'm a newbie too. Who else do we have? Grace, whoever is allowed in power is part of the deception. Kim, Trump, Vance, RFK, Vivek, Tulsi and Farage has been with the Republicans for years. There is a big picture on taking down the deep state on both sides of the ponds. I have lots more. I do intend to read them, but I hope that I've been live for quite a while. I hope that I'm not boring you guys. I will read through everything, and I will respond. I am going to write an article about this tomorrow. I don't know where this is going to go, and I don't know what I should do personally for the best. I'm not fussed about standing or not standing. I would just like to see the best person stand here and in every constituency as soon as possible. For me, the most important thing is that there is a democratically elected person who can every day be the opposition for the MP in that constituency, because we need to fight them one seat at a time and one issue at a time, because what is happening is sinister. And today, this week, these events, they are disappointing. I know that many people are angry, disheartened, disillusioned, and it's completely understandable, myself included. So I don't know going forward one way or the other. I'm not here to slate Reform as a party. As I said previously, I like their policies because I agree with them. And I just wish that we could implement them. I wish that we were able to speak up, that we were respected more as individuals, which is what were led to believe that we would be in the early days, because I, for one, would not be willing to just be an official mouthpiece to just toe the party line for Reform or anyone. I would like to be able to voice my opinion one way or the other about what I feel is right or wrong. And now I'm a little bit in no man's land this evening, and I don't know where this is going to go. Either way, on the issues that I am really concerned about, I will continue to fight, because it's not a party issue. It is about what I believe to be right and wrong. And no matter what they're doing, I still intend to push these issues. And on that note, later this week, hopefully I will be scheduling a live stream to discuss further action to fight against the cut in the winter fuel allowance, because I feel very passionately about it for the reasons that I have said. Again, I don't know what I'm going to do about that, and I'd love to hear your suggestions of what you think we should do. I'm going to be going out and speaking to some older people and trying to establish in this area where I am of Kingsthorpe in Northampton who's vulnerable, so that we can arrange for people to keep an eye on those who are vulnerable. Perhaps you might consider doing that in your own area, wherever you are in the country, because it's just doesn't sit well with me. It's immoral that people who've given their lives to this country and laid the foundation for us to have such wonderful lives are spending their older years unable to keep warm. And on that note, thank you very, very much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. Thank you for joining me. Always happy to hear your comments. I don't mind if you agree or disagree. It's about the debate. That's what really matters. Thank you very much, and good night. Bye-bye for now.